I'm here, however, tonight to introduce Kenneth Freeman, who is Allen Questrom Professor and, for the past 4 years, and hopefully the future, Dean of the School of Management. Ken received his Bachelor of Science degree from Bucknell, Phi Beta Kappa, and summa cum laude, and went to work for Corning Incorporated. And after getting his MBA with distinction from Harvard Business School, returned and had what can only be described as a meteoric rise. And he was, just to give the highlights of a distinguished career, he was ranked by Harvard Business Review as one of the 100 top performing CEOs on the planet, which is quite amazing. For his turnaround of Quest Diagnostics from a failing spin-off of Corning Labs to reading one of your blogs, Ken, about walking through that company and people wouldn't look at each other, and the HR department couldn't even tell them how many people worked there. And he turned this company around to not only one of the most successful companies in diagnostic testing for the health professions, worth $9 billion, but also apparently a wonderful place to work. And he's going to talk about that tonight. He's also a regular contributor at Harvard Business Review and other magazines with blogs that are on succession planning and culture and values and home life work balance. His non-business passions are spending time with his family. He's a grandfather, apparently, and been married to the same woman for 38 years, and music, playing the piano, which he apparently supplemented his income at Bucknell by playing piano and organ. However, he said that he had considered continuing in that career, but says he discovered quickly if I wanted to eat, I would need to do something other than perform music. So music's loss is BU's gain. Please welcome Ken Freeman.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in Rhett Talks this evening. My talk is not based on research. It's based on experience. The theme is don't let your career cause regrets in your personal life. What matters most to you? An intensely personal question. What matters most to you? Is it making money and creating wealth? Is it establishing strong and lasting relationships? Perhaps it's making a difference in the world. No matter what your answer, we all share a common circumstance. There quite simply is not enough time to do everything we want to do. I call it the tyranny of time. We have so many pressures for our attention. Our work, our profession, our relationships, our families, our interests, and also the need for personal time to refresh ourselves. So the challenge is not unlike the challenge faced by a juggler in a circus, to balance all three in a way that works for us as individuals: our professional life, our personal life, and our life of self. I'd like to share a short, intensely personal story with you. I'd been working for 25 years for Corning, had been married for 25 years, had 2 growing children, a son in high school, and a daughter who had just gone off to college in a distant community. If my wife were here tonight, of now 42 years, she would say the allocation of time for Ken Freeman between work, family, and self was at best 90% work, 10% personal, and 0% self. And it had been that way for most of our married life. I was always striving, always aiming high, competing to get the next level, what you might call a type A+, a 4.0. Quite simply, I had not been balancing my life, and it was a long-standing issue. Then one day, the phone rang at our apartment in New York City. It was in the evening. I received a call from the Duke University Medical Center. They called to say that our daughter had been admitted to the hospital on campus with a very serious, life-threatening, undiagnosed illness. She was suffering from internal bleeding throughout much of her body. As any parent would, I immediately rushed to her bedside. And as I stood there, seeing her in her weakened state, contemplating her very uncertain future, I was seized with regret, thinking about my frequent absences during her still very young life. I talked with her about these regrets. Although I was relieved to hear her say she felt I had always been there for her, I knew I hadn't. And our conversation at that bedside changed my life forever. I never again took for granted that the conflicts of work and personal life would somehow work themselves out. So I have a question for you. Do any of you view yourselves as hard-charging? Perhaps overachieving? Aiming high? Pursuing greatness at all costs? My guess is many of you do. After all, you're students at Boston University. With the benefit of a vivid life lesson and many years on the planet, what advice do I have for you as you grapple with the inevitable tug and pull of personal, professional, and self lives? The popular press has lots of prescriptions for this issue. They call it work-life balance. They talk about making time for non-work activities. They will tell you exercise to reduce stress. They'll say learn to say no, which of course we all know how to do so very, very well. That was meant to be a joke. Thank you. And also, of course, very helpful wisdom, just manage your time more efficiently. These are all fine ideas. Actually, they're good to pursue. However, the fact is, there is no magic formula. I've got some thoughts I'd like to share with you tonight about what we might call guiding principles, however, that might enable you to think a bit more about the problem and what you might do about it. 5 simple ideas. The first, be realistic about your work. It's a fact. It takes hard work to get to the top of whatever you choose to do. It's a fact that there's no relief when you get to the top. If you're in business at the top, you're going to have investors pursuing you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, seeking more from you. We've got globalization, which is a 24-hour-a-day issue for anyone in business, for instance. And of course, technology is tethered to us day and night, just not possible to remove from our lives at any point in time. With that all said, being realistic about work is on us. We have to realize we can't do everything. We shouldn't even try to do everything. We need to prioritize and to focus our lives, in part by being realistic about work. The second guideline, if you will, is to not expect perfection in your personal life. So many of us think we'll grow up, we'll have a family, we'll be just like all those old television shows were when I was growing up, where everything was so very, very perfect. But in fact, it wasn't. By not expecting perfection in your personal life, in business terms, we think about something called 6 Sigma, where we strive for perfection. Businesses are doing this every day of the week, striving for error-free work, no issues, just be perfect and everything will be fine. The guiding principle is that's not the measure. Expect to fall short some of the time and then try to do better. Continuous improvement is the goal, not perfection. And have your loved ones and your friends not hold you to that impossible standard or either let you off the hook entirely, right? Let them be in the middle somewhere. If you've got friends and colleagues holding you to the highest standard of perfection, this will be a challenge for you in pursuing balance and integration in your life. The third principle is to change the metaphor from balancing work and life and self to integrating work and life and self. For decades, work and life have been described as work-life balance. But work and life are inextricably intertwined. Work supports our loved ones. It's a big part of our identities. It shapes our social lives as well in so many ways. And smartphones, of course, bind us to work and to our non-work lives. One way to perhaps begin getting after the balance to integration model is to keep an integrated calendar, treating your personal commitments as important as your work commitments. The challenge is to integrate work and personal life effectively, not achieve separation, because that's less attainable than ever. The fourth guiding principle is to be present. When you're with your family and friends, be there fully, in spirit, in addition to your body. No zoning out, no waiting for the kick under the table to bring you back to earth. My wife is excellent at that, by the way. But at the same time, don't treat your personal encounters like just a regular check-in meeting. It's so important in our personal lives in particular to put our heart on the table. The fifth and final guiding principle for consideration is don't forget about yourself. The biggest loss in the push and pull of work and life integration or balance is your own personal well-being. What do we give up to maintain work and personal balance, and professional and work balance? We skip the workout. We delay the annual physical, which for those at my age is not a good idea. At your age, it may not matter so much. We rarely read a book that's not about work. We take limited time for self-reflection. It was said hundreds of years ago that a healthy mind is a healthy body. Such timeless and important advice. So 5 guiding principles. Be realistic about work. Don't expect perfection in your personal life. Change the metaphor about work and life balance to integrated work and life. Be present in all you do, and don't forget about yourself. It's interesting, we've heard about a famous poet named W.B. Yeats or William Butler Yeats. For those in the room that would like to know this, 1865 was when he was born, 1939 he passed away. A wonderfully famous Irish poet, one of the foremost figures of 20th century literature. And of course, Professor Preston talked to us about his efforts to create no in the 19th century. The poet, Yeats, wrote a poem called The Choice. And I read it. The intellect of man is forced to choose perfection of the life or of the work. And if it take the second, must refuse a heavenly mansion raging in the dark. When all that story's finished, what's the news? In luck or out the toil has left its mark, that old perplexity and empty purse, or the day's vanity, the night's remorse. Yeats considers the consequences of choosing perfection of life or perfection of work, and suggests that choosing work can exact a high personal cost and end in great disappointment. Personally, I could not agree more. So we're faced, each of us, with the power to choose. Although perfection in work or perfection in personal life is not attainable, we do have the power to choose. In any given moment, we can decide what we'll do. Give work its due, or be fully present for our loved ones, or have precious time for ourselves. We should count ourselves lucky that we have the choice. These choices are not burdens. They're a cause for celebration and a very full, meaningful life. Thank you. I bet you never expected to have the dean of the business school talk about poetry in a Rhett talk.
Hi.
Hi.
Is that on? Yeah.
You're on.
So I know you said that this started about 25 years into your career. Do you think you would have gone as far in your career if you had started this from the beginning?
What a great question. I think the short answer is I don't know, because so much of one's career is also driven by luck and circumstance. I think if I had had the realization sooner, I would have lived a fuller life during those first 25 years. I was so driven by being quote-unquote successful in my professional life that I was making intense sacrifices on both my personal life and my own person, self-life, that you can't get that back. I'm pleased to report my daughter is alive and well. She recovered. But we all have these defining moments during our lives, whether it's during our career or in our personal circumstances, that define who we are. Yours will happen at a time when you least expect it. And if you think about that notion of integrating work life, personal life, and self earlier, I would just suggest you have the opportunity for a much fuller life that'll be to your personal benefit and those around you.
Hi. I'm not sure if you would know this, but you talked about how your daughter's experience affected you. Do you know how it influenced her to change her life?
Interesting. Subsequent to her time in the hospital, my daughter, we talk about this quite frequently, as it turns out. She's currently living in Singapore, which creates quite a distance for us to engage in dialogue. But our daughter has become a much more full person for the experience that she had, such that her ability to enjoy life to the fullest has gone off the charts in a very positive way. As we know, sometimes the apple grows close to the tree. And to say my daughter historically was an A+ is perhaps an understatement. She also shares some of those genetic attributes, if you will. And the experience she lived through and the fact that she was able to survive the experience gave her an entirely new perspective on what it means to live a full life that carries on to this day, which is now almost 15 years later, more than 15 years later.
Hi, I have a question about with businesses and I guess jobs are so reliant on metrics of productivity and results. What's your experience from the response companies have to respecting your choices of going home a little bit earlier from work or making those choices you described in your speech?
I think there's been a tremendous evolution of corporate awareness over the last several decades so that we're in a much better place today than we were even as recently as 5 to 10 years ago. But that said, each corporation, each company has its own culture, its own DNA. So I always think about when I engage with our students, with you, and you think about where you want to go for your professional life, to think about the culture of the organization you might be entering, to say, will I have the opportunity to be able to integrate my work, my personal and my self lives? Because in some cases it will be obvious that you can. In others you'll have the circumstance where it's not obvious that you can. And we see symptoms of changes companies are trying to make to pose as more friendly towards the balance or integration. You may have seen that Goldman Sachs a year or so ago encouraged its employees, its junior associates, to take Saturdays off. Well, isn't that a wonderful, wonderful way to drive work and personal life integration? I say that somewhat facetiously, but the challenge is there'll be A+ers out there that will be even more intensely working on Saturdays, thinking that's how they have to get ahead. So you have to find your spot, but the cultural aspect, I would suggest, is the most important in whatever company you might choose to go work for, or any institution, academic institution, wherever you might choose to make your professional life who you are. Thank you.